Good evening. I'm Jerry Sullivan. I'm the founder and chief columnist for Sullivan Says SoCal.com, a digital news column that goes out to subscribers throughout Southern California. And I'm here for the first Sullivan Says SoCal on YouTube. So welcome. And we hope we're producing all this under the conditions of COVID-19 and that social distance and everything else. We hope it all goes smoothly. Please understand if there's a glitch or two. And let's get on with it. I was a little, wanted to relax a little before the show today. So I went to lunch with Frank Motek, the radio newsman for KNX. He's the voice of business in Southern California. So I met Frank over at the Mayborn Hotel at Beverly Hills today. And we're sitting there, I'm trying to relax and everything else. And then I realized I'm talking to the voice of Southern California business, that smooth baritone that he has and everything else. And I'm thinking, well, okay, I'm feeling a little raspy, but that's okay. And then Frank turns to me and he says, hey, look who's at the next table. And it's Pat Boone. So now I got golden voice and the golden boy from the 1950s. And yeah, now I'm really starting to wonder about what I've gotten into here. But I'm here. Let's do this. And I want to introduce or give my guests, Rick Reef and John Morlock, each a chance to introduce themselves. So if you would, please.
Well, Jerry, I'm glad you decided to take a little different tack with your voice on this show. But anyways, good Chicago accent. But yeah, well, thanks, Jerry. I'm the editor-at-large of the Orange County Business Journal. I've covered journalism. I've been a journalist for more than 50 years now. I started when I was 2, obviously. But the last 30 plus years, I've been in Southern California as a reporter, writer, editor, and also the host and producer of TV shows on public television. And so I've been following California for a long time. And unless something drastic changes, I want my gravestone to read that California is a natural wonder and a man-made disaster.
Great. Now, if John Morlock.
This is John Morlock. And I started my career as a certified public accountant, certified financial planner, was a partner in a large local firm here with offices in Long Beach and Costa Mesa. In '94, I decided to run for Orange County Treasurer Tax Collector. And the rest is sort of history. It started my public service life. The treasurer was borrowing to invest. Interest rates were being raised by Alan Greenspan, and his hedge fund imploded, and I was appointed to replace him. Served as treasurer for the County of Orange for 12 years. Ran for supervisor because I was frustrated with pension plan enhancements that were being approved by boards and others that just didn't seem to do the math. That gave me 8 years of experience on the board of supervisors for the 6th most populated county in the nation. Then I served as 6 years in the state senate in Sacramento, and had a real good experience enjoying being in the minority, the super minority in Sacramento as a Republican. And now I have just was not successful in getting reelected. Orange County is changing a little bit, but there was just a whole lot of money spent against me. So, but it's an honor to be with Rick and Jerry, 2 superstars in the media realm. And Pat Boone's a nice guy. I have met him too at the Capitol. Super guy.
Well, if I could return the compliment to John, I have covered, as I said, journalists for 50 years, and I have seen many public officials and politicians. John Morlock is the best, whether it's federal, state, local. There is nobody that compares with him. And often when I hear people say, "Oh, if only good people would run for office," and I go, no, that's not true. Good people do run for office. Very few of them have lasted as long as John. I mean, a quarter of a century in elected politics. But no, John was taken out this year, losing 2 elections, lost his Senate seat, and then lost an attempt to return to the county because of the most powerful special interests in this state, the public employee unions. And they poured millions into 2 really gutter campaigns against him. That's my opinion as to why he lost and he's not out. In a perfect world, he'd be the governor instead of hanging out with you and me, Jerry.
Well, we'll get to that later. And certainly you made your point of view clear. So and we will revisit the talk of the governor's potential governor's race coming up. Prior to that, though, let's look a little more locally. I wanted to talk about and really ask both of you from your perspective at somewhat of a remove about this incident or situation at Echo Park Lake, which is a lovely spot in the heart of Los Angeles. It's just a couple miles northwest of downtown. And over the course of the last couple of years, homeless encampment grew there and led to all sorts of friction between the campers and the neighborhood, and really had the city just completely hamstrung for a couple of years on what to do about this. And this past weekend, there was a sweep of the encampment. It was cleared out. The city apparently found or arranged for housing for the people in the encampments, so on and so forth. I'm just wondering, from your somewhat of a remove, you're within Southern California, not right in the middle of LA. Rick, what does this look like to you?
Well, I'll be pretty brief because I think again, John has done a lot of work on the homeless situation and will really be able to address it. But my thought looking at it, the big picture, this is what happens in a failed state. I mean, this is what happens when think about what we've done. We keep spending more and more money, spending more and more time on this problem of homelessness, and it only gets worse and worse. And it is now, you would think the job of government should be to reduce homelessness, eliminate it, hopefully, but at least reduce it. And instead, we've normalized it. It's now become its own industry. It has its advocates. Now it's like homelessness is a constituency. And so you wind up with residents pitted against each other. We've had it here in Orange County with Santa Ana and Irvine. Who's doing their fair share? Who's carrying the load? When with this problem that keeps growing. So I just think it's such a huge failure. I think the only long-term answer is to change things in California that probably aren't going to change, like income inequality, the ridiculously high price of housing, the lack of affordable housing. And so we don't address those root causes. So we wind up with a problem that then builds its own constituencies. It's a zero-sum game, and whoever controls the political levers comes out better.
Yeah, and I have no problem. We do have homeless people, and they do merit advocacy, and I'm glad there are some people advocating for them. I think I understand your point about it's becoming more of a formalized sector almost. I always look at it as, a lot of people will look at what happened in Echo Park, and the basic question is, why can't the city provide shelter for the homeless and keep its public park open, right? Why is this so difficult? And I think in my column of this week, I asked, why is that so difficult when the people of Los Angeles have agreed to tax themselves to put billions of dollars against this problem? And it becomes, and then you look at, I think when you're Los Angeles is a very corrupt place right now. And when you're dealing with corruption, I think you got to look at it through a lens of corruption. And when you see something that looks as though it's not working, look at it through a lens of corruption. And maybe, is it working like this? Everyone looks at Los Angeles and says, oh, look, there's a park there with a lot of homeless people in it. That's a big problem. There's a couple hundred homeless people in a park in Los Angeles. The truth is we have 30,000 or more homeless people all over the city of Los Angeles. And I wonder sometimes is that really what is it a big distraction? And not to diminish whatever troubles are inherent in the situation, but is it a big distraction from the point that it's 200 in a park in Echo Park, and now we're not talking about the 30,000 in the city of Los Angeles and the 60,000 countywide, who it seems like no matter what we do, no matter how much money we put toward it, it gets worse. John, from your point of view.
Well, you're touching on a topic that is so much bigger than Echo Park. The state of California has the highest poverty level of any state in the nation. It's over 20%. So if 1 in 5 people are already below poverty line, we've got a serious problem, especially in a state that is so successful with so many industries. But we also have mental illness, which is a big component of what is impacting homelessness. And we have a state that implemented the Lanterman-Petra Short Act back in 1967, and it closed the mental health institutions, but never opened community centers. So you moved all these people out of the institutions, they went out in the streets, and then they got arrested. And now the largest mental health institution in Orange County is the Central Jail in downtown Santa Ana. But we had our Echo Park, we had the Santa Ana River Trail with miles and miles of tents along the river by the Anaheim Stadium, and they were cleared out. And then you had someone in the form of Judge David O. Carter, who said, "Wait a second, you better find a place for them." And so we provided 2 months of hotel rooms. You can't solve homelessness in 2 months. You now have Judge David O. Carter as a federal judge in L.A., and he's trying to reform the mess in Skid Row and the rest there as well. But there isn't simple answers. And you have a governor who's at least done Project Room Key and Project Home Key, buying hotels and trying to do the rest. But you need full service. You need to deal with the mental health aspect. You need to find these people. You need to diagnose them, and then you give them the proper medication so that they can get back into a mainstream and be productive, or at least do some kind of work to help pay for their freight in our society. And so it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. And it's happening, but you're right. It's still not organized enough, Jerry, especially in LA. I mean, how do you explain $1 billion? How do the state auditor just came out with a report and said that even the agencies at the state level aren't communicating with each other. So you still need some good management, and government isn't the place for that. So in Orange County, we've seen a lot of organizations that are private that have started and formed. We have Be Well, Mind OC that's working. We've opened a clinic on Anita Street in the city of Orange to try and help people with mental illness. So it takes a group effort. It takes everybody to jump in, and there is some progress, but you're right, it's a very difficult process.
Well, now let's talk about Orange County. There's an item, I had an item in this week's column about a new homeless shelter in Costa Mesa over by John Wayne Airport, sort of in an industrial area. Beautiful center that they built there. The city of Newport Beach contributed money to the development of the shelter in Costa Mesa, and will pay, I think, $1.2 million a year, somewhere in that area, for 20 of the 70 beds. Now, I guess there's a lot of ways you could look at this as the city of Newport Beach being able to pay Costa Mesa to handle or warehouse its problem, or you could look at it as it's an effective use. In any case, I think give the city of Newport Beach credit for zeroing in on a problem and taking steps to address it. They're paying about it comes to about $137 a night per bed, which is kind of high. How does that strike you, as both from a financial and just a governance standpoint?
Well, what's really interesting is that for years, cities have been requested to establish what we call SB2 zones, Senate Bill 2 zones, which says you need to find a location within your city where you can house homeless people. You can have a 24-hour-a-day homeless shelter year round where you can send people. When I was supervisor, I always used to have fun with the city council members of Newport Beach, and I would say, "Hey, where's your SB2 zone?" And they'd look at me with blank stares, like, "Well, we don't have any property set aside for a homeless shelter." I had the city council of Lomita, which is in your sphere of influence, and I said, "Where is your SB2 zone?" And they looked at me and said, "We're only 1.5 miles square. We're fully built out." I said, "Well, then why don't you?" Then I said, "Where do you send your homeless?" "Oh, to the city next door." I said, "Well, don't you think it would be good if you reimburse them for the cost of housing your homeless people in their shelter?" And so that's what Newport Beach is doing. They're doing a cooperative opportunity to provide a substitute SB2 zone. Now, the costs, that's a great discussion. I haven't really dug into the metrics of this particular shelter, because
And it can
you
vary.
want to compare it to other shelters and say, what is it costing in other places? What's it costing the private sector? What's it costing government? And how do we find a range that's acceptable and makes sense?
Yeah, and just to be fair, there are various levels of service, so the cost, can be explained by that in some cases. But on the face of it, $137 a night seems a little steep. Rick, how do you see it? Is this a rich neighbor taking care, asking middle class neighbor to handle its load, or?
Looking at it from one standpoint, yes. Again, though, it's kind of the market working. Costa Mesa obviously thinks it's an acceptable deal for them. It's something that, so you've got two cities that have come together and worked something out. But yes, you could take that spin, and to some extent, there's some truth in that, because I don't know how scalable this thing is. I mean, it's to me, again, this is a good thing. That Newport Beach has worked out with Costa Mesa, but it's 20, it's 20, or the whole thing is 70 or 80 beds. And, that's, how many of those can you do? Again, it's getting to what I've been saying, the frustrating thing. I think John hit on it. It's a mental health issue. It's a drug issue. There's many aspects to homelessness. Not all homeless people have the same issues, but it's largely a mental health thing. And that's long-term to address. I'd love to hear from John whether he thinks progress is being made, because otherwise, you'll have Newport Beach. All right, so they figured out 20 beds. Someone else is going to have to figure out some beds over here. You're going to be moving people around, opening centers. Neighbors are going to be complaining, and I just think there's got to be some way to begin to reduce this problem. And I don't know. I think a drastic thing might be a whole rethinking that we have to. Again, I hate to say it, I think we have to maybe reinstitutionalize some people. And I don't hear anybody talking about reinstitutionalizing people, although I see John nodding in agreement. But I'd love.
Listen, I think one of the things John pointed out is, do we have the proper capacity, even if you decided to reinstitutionalize people? Do we have the proper, appropriate facilities to put them in? I'm not so sure we do. John?
Well, we do. We don't now, but we have the ability to. We have what's called the Mental Health Services Act, which was passed in 2004. It was Prop 63. It was authored by Darrell Steinberg, and it provides money it's the 1% millionaires tax in California. It's been providing a lot of money for the state. When I became a senator, I asked Darrell Steinberg if I could have just a little bit of it to provide for more emergency mental health beds. We have police officers that encounter people that are mentally ill, that are having a psychotic episode, and then they have to figure out which emergency room somewhere in the county that they can send them. And Orange County at that time only had 10 beds for 3.2 million people. And so Darrell Steinberg was good enough to give me some funding. In fact, the Department of Public Health went ahead and just changed the regulations. So we've increased the number of beds to help that segment of the mentally ill. I also did Laura's Law with Darrell Steinberg when I was supervisor. We were the second county in the state out of 58 to adopt Laura's Law, which puts mentally ill people in front of a judge if they've had an encounter with the police department, and the judge will ask them to go on an assisted outpatient treatment program to help medicate them and get them stabilized. 17 other counties have followed suit, and a recent study showed that the rest of the counties should as well. So we've made some progress in that realm, but maybe one little dirty secret is that Costa Mesa and Newport Beach working together, Costa Mesa is broke. Of the 34 cities in Orange County, it is in the worst financial shape. It's in the bottom 10 percentile of cities in the state of California, and it needs every $1 million a year it can find or scratch up anywhere it can. It's in worse shape than Anaheim, and Anaheim is just talking about having to borrow $210 million just to meet cash flow. So we've got some real interesting issues when you start stepping out and spending more money. And we got to find ways to have the Mental Health Services Act help out more in this regard.
And that's very interesting, because a city in difficult financial straits might use this as a way out of it and really change the nature of their city with an overload. And so it seems like there's all kinds of potentials for problems here, but it's certainly one to keep an eye on, and we certainly will. Staying down in Orange County, let's talk a little bit about COVID. Jim Doty, the president emeritus of Chapman University in Orange, just did a study for the Journal of Bioeconomics. Interesting piece. Found that it was the first study that really looked at the data on a statewide level for all 50 states. One of the things he found was the folks who got out of town and maybe went to their second home or out to the country, get out of the more densely populated areas, COVID followed them. The first half of the year, that worked. And by the second half of the year, according to this study, COVID was as prevalent in a less dense area than a dense area. So it seemed to follow them and maybe sort of rendered that maneuver moot. Also found no link between race and ethnicity and COVID, which is, and it gets a little interesting, and you got to be careful there. It did not foreclose the possibilities that racism or ethnic discrimination have a role, which both of those could be a factor in poverty, and poverty was definitely a factor in COVID. So Jim's study didn't take it off the table, but just on the face of it, there's not a direct link between, as much as we hear about the disparities, it seems to be much more socioeconomic than racial or ethnic. And of course, there are overlaps and links between those two. I don't mean to say there aren't, but just from a point of view of, as both of you have observed, the coverage, both the coverage by the media and the communications from our public health agencies, how do you think they've done on COVID?
I'll tackle the media part of it. It's been disappointing. It's been again, we live in a world now, a media world that's increasingly confrontational. It's the big headline. It's catering to an audience, and it's creating a lot of polarization. And this COVID thing became very politicized, and I lay a lot of it at the feet of the media. In fact, Jerry, I'll tell you, you seemed apologetic that you were suggesting that maybe racism, or you didn't want to indicate that racism wasn't a factor in this. I don't know. I haven't heard one good explanation yet as to how racism has played into COVID. Certainly, poverty and social and particularly economic disparities have, it was almost a given that was going to happen. And that doesn't justify it by any means. But yes, of course, this has been, there's income disparities, and that can be, I would be surprised if it wasn't reflected in some way in the COVID numbers. But I really don't understand this idea of racism. Are there racist doctors who won't give shots to, minorities?
No, I think maybe you misunderstood. My point was, and what the study's point was, that race in and of itself is not linked. So in other words, there's an obvious linkage of between race on sickle cell anemia, which affects primarily.
Yes.
There's not a racial link to COVID. Now, one could say that the study definitely found there's a link to poverty. Now, if you take the next step and say racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, racism in general would be linked to poverty, then that is linked to COVID.
Yes, except
not taking off the table, right. But the direct medical link is a different story.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a subtlety that coverage is missed.
Well, it's a subtlety that the media has missed, and that I think there's been this tendency now to see everything through the lens of structural racism and things like that, and I think it has really not served the public well when it comes to COVID.
John, one of the things I've noticed about public health officials, and I would say there's a criticism on the margins. We hear so much about science is going to dictate what we do, and we're listening to the doctors. but it seems like a lot of the communications has been really laden with emotion. And it just seems to me to be there's a dissonance between we're going to be scientific and give you data and really stick to the facts here. And then I see a lot of public health officers who really become sort of emotionally vested in the whole thing. What's your thoughts on how this has been communicated from a public standpoint?
Well, it's been a year now. I was asked to leave Sacramento, and we kind of shut down the legislature for a while. And we gave all authority to the governor. We gave him a little budget, and off he went. And the science was utilized, but it was not understood. You don't close beaches. Somehow, someone thought that maybe more COVID was happening in beach cities like San Clemente and Newport Beach. Well, those people happen to travel around the world, and they were bringing COVID from their business and pleasure trips to Orange County. So it wasn't the spray off of the waves, but yet we had a governor that shut down beaches. But the governor had some model that he was using with algorithms that we still don't know. I don't know what he was using, but he started taking over every hospital bed he could find. He rented out the Arco arena in Sacramento, spent $500,000 a month, and only had like 8 patients at all in that place. He had the Mercy ship show up in San Pedro. I mean, we were expecting some spike that never occurred. We just had a slow grow, and then that sort of tapered off. So the communication has been so bizarre, not only in California, but maybe in other countries. But Sweden certainly had a whole different model, and our numbers aren't better than Sweden's after all the silliness that we've gone through and how many businesses we've lost and how many people have had to collect unemployment insurance, and what a failure the Employment Development Department was, which is a department of Governor Newsom's that he oversees. So down on the streets, the calls we would get when I was in the Senate were how do I get my unemployment benefits? And so the communication was awful, and it was based on faulty algorithms that kind of messed us up from the get-go.
Well, we've talked about homelessness and COVID, and of course, it's been a hell of a past year on both fronts, especially in LA. And it hasn't gone real well. And there's a federal investigation of City Hall and public corruption. And just when you think things couldn't get more strange, there's an encounter in a parking lot recently, and we're going to try and bring this video here. And it's between a citizen, a business person in Los Angeles, who went to visit the offices of the fellow who works for Mayor Eric Garcetti's LA Mayor's Fund, which is a private nonprofit separate from his official duties. Has raised about $60 million in the past year, and this fellow wanted to know a little bit more about it. Went to visit, got in a little bit of a disagreement, I guess, but take a look at this video if we could show it.
Are you going to move?
No, this is my parking lot. I pay rent here. You don't.
Okay, and I'm leaving.
Explain who you are.
The gates were open. I came in and I went upstairs to see where the mayor's fund was.
And taking pictures. I don't go to your office and take pictures. I don't think people do that normally.
Now, this is just weird stuff. This fella, his name is Fraser Ross. He's a retailer here. He's got a shop on Robertson Boulevard. It's very well known. Stopped by, and I think he took a photo in the building. So in the hallway outside this guy's office, he snapped a photo. And the fella who was blocking the car is named Yusuf Rob, and he was identified. And I think KCBS, David Goldstein, did an investigative piece on this fund, started to look into it. And Yusuf Rob spoke as a representative of the fund. So Fraser looked up Yusuf Rob, went down, decided to drop in and see what's going on, and winds up sort of getting locked into the parking lot. It's just they're by the way, their lawyers are going back and forth about it now. It's a strange situation, but John, you've been in government a long time. what's going on? What's with this stuff? There's a lot of oddity in the air.
Well, like I said earlier, the state auditor has found that the money being spent on homelessness around the state is sort of being mismanaged. But when you have an opportunity to meet with an official, you shouldn't be threatened or harassed or thrown out. You should at least be provided an opportunity to schedule an appointment, and there should be complete transparency. And if anything, they should be providing financial reports of what they're doing with the $60 million.
Rick, what do you think of that video clip? Is it just a bizarre fact?
I got to say that Yusuf guy, if you're, I'm not sure I'd stand in front of a car, a running car with the guy, ready to take off. And, I don't think Yusuf wins that confrontation if it escalates.
Well, it's funny because Yusuf told me, he said, listen, I was frightened for my safety. I said, then why'd you stand in front of the car?
Well, and I think and Jerry, this is the kind of stuff you're reporting on every week, and it's really good stuff. I think you noted that Yusuf now took down something on his website that he said he was affiliated with the mayor's office, and now he's not.
Yeah, his Twitter account had said special advisor to Eric Garcetti. Now, the day after that item ran, that was gone.
Right. Well, here's the whole point. One of the reasons I said so many nice things about John earlier, one of his strengths is his transparency. Good politicians, good public officials are transparent. Everything you write every week, Jerry, about LA, it's this city with a lot to hide. There's an awful lot to hide.
Yeah, there sure is.
And I guess this is the time to bring up that federal the federal probe of corruption in LA, and I think that's had a lot to do with the fallen star of Eric Garcetti. And again, this is just based on the things I read about Garcetti, and I have not seen the LA media do a really definitive story on the fact that just a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I mean, this guy was a rising star. He had brought the Olympics in 2028, I believe, back to LA. He's traveling around the country. He's kind of, testing the waters to run for president in 2018. And then there's this corruption probe, some other things. And then, it was just a couple of months ago, December. I mean, I was Googling it because I was coming on the show here back in December. All sorts of stories about all these jobs Garcetti might get with the Biden administration. I don't know, transportation secretary. Who winds up getting it? The mayor from South Bend. But there's all this speculation. He got nothing.
No,
and there really hasn't been much about, well, what happened? Why didn't he get it?
I think the legacy media,
the Senate, and now, I think there's a chance he's just going to fade away.
Yeah, I think the legacy media in LA is in a bind in that, in order to really cover what's going on there and the corruption and the falling stars, because Garcetti's not alone, you almost have to admit you were asleep for 10 years. And so, it'd probably be a little easier on their pride if this just kind of went along and went away. But I don't think it's going to. And I think the case against Jose Huizar is a former councilman who's been indicted and getting ready for trial might, really open it up. But you're right. And I think Garcetti, he went from, and, Mayor Garcetti actually did a decent job of putting himself legitimately in the conversation early for president. It didn't seem too much of a stretch. So he got there. That went away. Then it was cabinet member. That went away. Then it was some job. And he might still get some job, an ambassadorship or something, but I kind of doubt it. And what I'm noticing now is it seems the staff is very dispirited. I think a lot of them were counting on a ticket to Washington and realize it's not happening now. But with that, and we've gone on a bit about the local stuff, and that's great. But now let's turn to the statewide picture and talk about the statewide stuff and the recall. It looks like it's going to happen. And I wonder, right off the bat, John Moorlach, do you, is it worth it to recall a governor more than halfway through his term?
Yes, it is.
Why is it?
Well, I guess the biggest thing that it impresses upon me is that we now have a blue state with a governor, Democrat, who can do just about anything he wants and not be held accountable. He's going to get reelected in 2022, and there's no leverage. You have a super majority in the legislature. Republicans can't do anything, so you can't override a veto of a good Republican bill. So this is leverage. This is an opportunity to say, wait a second, we think you've gone over the boundaries of what's reasonable. You haven't handled the COVID epidemic properly. You haven't, the list goes on of things. And here's an opportunity to take on someone and say, look, we're going to hold you accountable because you're a puppet. You're a puppet to the public employee unions. You can't even figure out how to get kids into school. And you got the CTA, the California Teachers Association, with a dog chain around your neck, yanking it all the time. And you're not getting anything accomplished, and you're frustrating so many people. So the recall is an opportunity. It's a glorious opportunity to force the public employee unions to defend this guy and put it to the vote. And there's just two questions. Basically, one, should we recall him? If the answer is yes, then two, who do we vote for? That's a big question in and of itself. But I think this is a glorious opportunity because the dirty secret is that these public employee unions are always doing ballot measures that frustrate good conservative business people in this state. You do rent control, you do split roll, and threaten to increase property taxes on businesses like Disneyland. And so all these businesses have to raise all this money to fight these stupid propositions that almost pass. And so now it's kind of nice to see the grassroots stand up and say, we're going to take you on, and we're going to make you pay to defend this guy, because it's been awful. I mean, because he can do anything he wants. He can skirt chase. He can do, lousy law. He can sign AB 5 and put all the independent contractors out of work with no fear of ever being held accountable.
Well, let me ask you this, because and you're certainly entitled to all those opinions, but there's one statement of fact there I wanted to follow up with. If you said he will get reelected in 2022. If you concede that point, does it make sense to try a recall in 2021?
I stand by my affirmative. Absolutely. I want these guys to spend as much money to defend this guy so that we have a level playing field in this state. So in 2022, maybe if we can deplete some of the public employee union cash reserves, then a Republican candidate may have a sporting chance.
Well, there you go, Rick. That sounds tactical to me.
Well,
Which I'm not saying there's not room in the world for tactics, but strategically, Rick, how do you see this?
Well, as someone who sees himself as a fair-minded observer, no, I don't think it makes much sense to do this because John is absolutely right about all the games that if you want to call them the left or the public employee unions play in California. But two wrongs don't make a right. On the other hand, I do think the recall has had already a very tangible benefit. I do believe that it is why Gavin Newsom is now beginning to reopen the state and moving that, and even moving toward getting the schools back open and stuff. I think he's feeling the heat. I think he's really feeling the heat from this recall. I still think it's a long shot. I mean, I'm not a prognosticator or I'm not a pollster. But it has a sporting chance of happening. It is the only way that a Republican could get in. But you mentioned Villaraigosa. I mean, he would certainly be in the mix, and as a Democrat. I think it is a great way to express dissatisfaction. John mentioned the handling of COVID. My God, we've got high gas prices, cost of living, rising taxes, failing inner city schools, power outages, wildfires out of control. You can go on, and here's the point. Here's the beauty. When Newsom runs in 2022, he's running against a Republican, and he's going to win. A Republican's going to lose that head-to-head. But in a recall, Newsom is running against all the problems that Californians have. And we're losing people. People are moving out of the state. That doesn't mean everybody that's still here is happy with what's going on. And most people, just like the people that voted for Donald Trump, most people don't have great party loyalty. They want it. They're mad as hell, and they aren't going to take it anymore.
Let's look at it from this standpoint. It does look like it did get the support it needed to get on the ballot, so it's there. Now, I know Antonio Villaraigosa a bit, not well personally, but I've covered him a long time and know him a bit, and I know he likes a fractured field. I think he feels that his base, if it comes down to winning a plurality, he's got a head start with a very strong base. Not a bad political approach. John Morlock, I've seen your name floated as a possible candidate in a recall election, and I might submit that you might take a similar view about a certain base that would hold for you and do well in a fractured field. Are you considering this at all?
Thank you, Jerry, and thank you for the opportunity to make my announcement. I've been in articles recommending that I should be a candidate, but I just finished the special election, winner take all. And so it's going to be real interesting whether it's Antonio Villaraigosa or Tom Steyer on the Democratic side. But we've already got candidates in John Cox, who ran in 2018. We've got Kevin Faulconer, a former mayor of San Diego, who's putting on a strong charge. We've got Doug Osee out of Sacramento, former congressman, who's looking at it. And you've got Richard Grinnell, who used to be with the Trump administration, who's also taking a hard look. And you can only have one winner. And when you spread out the potential of candidates, it just doesn't work. So somehow the Republicans have to coalesce, be smart about this. And we still don't know who else might pop up. And when an Arnold Schwarzenegger announced, that just changed the whole game back in.
Are you out?
Am I out?
Yeah.
Well, if you and a few friends pop up with $20 million, I might be in.
Let me ask you about looking across.
That's interesting, Jerry. He did not deny it. He did not deny it. What I'm thinking, though, from the Republicans might, or anybody, who doesn't have the public employee unions on their side, would probably love to have Morlock in there, because the unions are sure, to spend some money to make sure, that John doesn't percolate up, So
you guys really go tactical on this stuff. That's, let me ask you, John.
You know what, though? Seriously, in this kind of a thing, it's fun. We're just speculating now. Who knows? But I'm thinking someone like a Faulconer, who's frankly too liberal for many, many Republicans. Okay, but he's a Republican. Okay, he probably has a better chance than certainly like someone like Grinnell, who's a Trumper. In my opinion, Faulconer has a chance. But Villaraigosa, in as you say, in a split field. Going back to Garcetti for a moment, one of the failings of Eric Garcetti, two big ones, is the budget mess that he's only made worse in the city of LA because he can't say no to anybody. And secondly, the schools. Look at what Villaraigosa actually tried to take on LAUSD and, reform the schools. And Garcetti's done nothing. He's been crickets.
Antonio Villaraigosa can make the case that he steered Los Angeles through the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, and it came out pretty strong. But he did, it's also worth noting, he had a fractured field when he ran in the primary against Newsom and Cox, and it didn't turn out very well for him. There was some disconnect. That campaign did not get traction. It was surprising. So we'll have to see it up there.
But Jerry, there was a lot of money that helped Villaraigosa out near the conclusion of the 2018 race, and that was from charter school supporters. And Gavin Newsom has been awful, and the legislature has been awful when it comes to charter schools. It's the only decent solution for those in the poverty zone and those in depressed neighborhoods. It's the only decent solution, and the Democrats have just beat up charter schools. And if Villaraigosa jumps in, this would be a sweet revenge if he could place in first place and knock out Gavin because the charter schools need to do something short of maybe doing a ballot measure in 22 to have school choice. But but I could see some real interesting players showing up to make this a real interesting game.
And I think any recall is a wild card. So I saw today about Newsom can feel kind of good about it. I wouldn't feel good about anything at all. It's a wild card. If the very fact that it's going forward means there's trouble. So, and I think with that, we should leave it there. And I thank you both very much. And this was actually a great deal of fun. There's going to be another show on April 28th, and we're going to have Wiley Aitken on. And we're going to give him a chance to have an unbalanced show from a Democratic point of view. And he's already said he'd do it. And so I look forward to it. And I thank you both very much.